So this is the Development Review Board for Burlington for June 21st. Assuming that there's members of the public listening to this, we take up items that are on in the order of the agenda. And when each item is called, we go through a process of admitting the applicant and anybody from the public who wishes to speak on it to become participants in the Zoom meeting. Scott will admit them, and we ask that people provide their names and addresses, and then we swear people in as appropriate for each agenda item. Communications, at this point, everything has been posted online. Is that true, Scott?
That's correct.
There's been some things that were posted shortly, a little while ago, but
Everything's there.
Everything's in minutes. There are draft minutes. Joe, I will get them to you signed. So we'll get right into the first item. Is a consent agenda item for 187 Pearl Street. Restoring openings in an existing historic building. Is Chris Mason the applicant?
Yes.
Hi, Chris.
Hello.
So this is recommended for consent, which means if you're okay with the staff's recommendations, we can move ahead on this. Are you okay with that?
Yes, I am okay with the staff's recommendation.
Okay. Does anybody on the board object to treating this as a consent item? No. And is there anybody in the public who wishes to speak on this one, Scott?
If you'd like to speak on this item, 187 Pearl Street, raise your hand now, please. Nope, just the applicant, Brad.
Okay. So does somebody on the board want to make a motion on 187 Pearl Street?
I can make a motion.
Okay, Jeff, thanks.
On 187 Pearl Street, which is BP-22-62, I move that we approve the request and adopt staff's findings and conditions.
Is there a second on that? Caitlin? Any discussion? All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. So you're all set, Chris.
Okay, thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay. So the next item is 77 Pine Street, which is appeal of an adverse determination regarding compliance with inclusionary zoning conditions. So I see that.
Brad, I'm recused on this one.
Okay. Thanks, AJ. And is anybody else here to speak on this besides Liam Murphy? Scott?
I see Diane Gare has her hand raised as well.
Diane, are you here to speak on this application?
Yes, can you hear me? I can't see anything. I think there are a number of us and I had a hard time getting on. So I don't know how quickly you're going to run through this.
Well,
So it's for 77 Pine Street, Diane, inclusionary zoning, or is this a different item you're attending for?
are you thinking this is Elmwood Avenue?
I'm
No,
thinking
it's-
maybe Diane's here for Elmwood or 501 Pine Street, but not 77.
Let me look. Oh, is that is that the Foster Street bed and breakfast?
No, no.
Hmm.
77.
So your agenda doesn't go by 77.
Yes, it does. ZAP 22-1, 77 Pine Street.
I think
Public
you're
hearing.
looking at the agenda for the next meeting right now, not that's the one that Foster Street is on. That's for the meeting on July 5th.
Okay,
Yeah.
so obviously it's not easy to negotiate all of this. Thank you. You're right that it's about the pods.
Okay, so that'll be later in the hearing.
Thank you.
We'll welcome you back then.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so Liam, I think I need to swear you in. Do you swear to tell the truth and whole truth under pain and penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay, and just a question about process. I'm always a little unclear about this, Scott. When this is appealing a adverse determination, is that something that the city presents their view first, or do we go right
Yes.
to? Okay,
Yep.
so is that you, Scott?
That would be me.
Okay, so if you can clarify your adverse determination.
Okay, ready, set, go.
Yeah.
So 77 Pine Street is the rehab of the People's United Bank. 49 residential units, cafe and a bank space. So because it has more than 5 units, they have an inclusionary zoning requirement of 15%. And in this case, we're still fairly early on, I would say, in the rewrite of Article 9, the inclusionary standards. And this is the first instance we've had under those rewritten standards of an applicant who wants to provide some inclusionary units on site and do the payment in lieu option for a couple others. In this case, 5 would be provided on site and payment in lieu would be done for the remaining 2, right, for a total of 7 units. And following discussion with the Housing Trust Fund folks at CEDO, we at the zoning division felt, okay, sure, split it between on-site and payment in lieu. Why not? The zoning code doesn't say you can't do that, and that makes sense. We're still getting to the same place. So the problem, however, or the crux of the matter, is the appellant's take on the payment in lieu fee due versus the city's take on the payment in lieu fee due. So a quick background on the payment in lieu fees. So those are intentionally split into 3 different tiers. Basically, smaller projects have a smaller payment in lieu fee. Middle-sized projects have a middle fee, and the biggest projects have the biggest fee. The intent there is basically to make the smaller and medium-sized projects more financially feasible to actually build, right? There was a concern that 20 plus years into inclusionary housing in Burlington is that it was basically cost prohibitive for the smaller and medium-sized projects. So there we have it. We have the payment in lieu fee split into 3 separate tiers, small, medium, and large. An important piece here is that the fees are applied with a marginal approach. So I'm looking at the code in the CDO right now, and for example, it says a 17-unit project would pay a total of $140,000. So that's $35,000 for each of the first 2 units and $70,000 for the third, right? So the more payment in lieu units you pay for, you start out lower fee and get higher. The CDO doesn't expressly call out the example we're dealing with right here. And so in some cases where the CDO isn't explicitly clear, our department has issued administrative interpretations. There's maybe a dozen or so, and they're all posted online. And in this case, there's an interpretation that came into play here directly pertaining to this. And that interpretation is included in your packet. And basically, it points out the intent at the lower fees for the smaller projects, the middle fees for the middle projects, and the larger fees for the larger projects. Fundamentally, the larger projects are paying the higher rate. In this case, we have a mid-tier project. And what we're saying is, in light of the standards in Article 9 and this administrative interpretation looking to clarify that, what we're saying is that the middle tier fee is applying to you guys. The nuance here that the appellant's pointing out is they're saying, well, it's our first 2 units. So, right, our first 2 units, we should get the low fee based on the marginal fee approach. We don't think that's the correct approach, given that it's a middle tier project, and think that could be abused in the future. Let's say we have a 100-unit project. right, going in. So that's a top tier project, has a top tier payment in lieu fee. They just want to do a handful of payment in lieus. We're talking about a top tier project paying the minimal payment in lieu fee. So fundamentally, the payment in lieu fee is geared at the small, medium, or large size of the project. And so that's what the determination said. Said you can split the difference between on-site inclusionary and payment in lieu, but we really think you need to pay that middle tier payment in lieu fee. So that's our position.
I have one question. Why, in your example, I'm trying to follow all this, why was there an option for the first unit to be paid for rather than go at $35,000? Why wouldn't they all be at $70,000?
Why wouldn't they all be at 70,000? I don't know is the short answer, except that those were split into the less fee, the smallest fee for the smallest projects, and then
No, but I meant
get higher.
in this middle tier, in the example, if
Mhm.
they had 5 units or something that they weren't building, wasn't it that the first unit would be 35,000, the next one would be 70,000? Am I misremembering there?
No, I don't have the firm numbers off the top of my head, Brad, but if it was 5 that they were doing payment in lieu, the first few, let's call it, would be the lower tier. And then the last, I think 1 or 2 would be the middle tier.
And why
Why-
is that?
Yeah, that's confusing to me. I don't see in the ordinance where it says the first 2 are at the lower
Yeah.
Well,
amount.
it just has that vague example. There's just one example.
Right, where in the ordinance it says it is at the bottom where it says a marginal fee approach shall be used. So why, I don't have an answer for you, Brad, as to why that choice was made. I do know that it was split into 3 tiers, again, for the smaller projects to have the smaller fee, and they get higher with an increase in project size.
I think what I struggle with this on Scott, is the example is one from the middle tier. Like the marginal example is a middle tier one, but it's only 1 unit into the middle tier. Whereas
Yeah.
this project is the highest number of units for the middle tier. Like, is that part of the argument because it's the highest part, like marginal wouldn't apply? Is it how many units into the tier you are that you're applying the marginal fee approach?
Yes, that's correct, Caitlin. So let's see if I can do math out loud on the fly. So 5 to 16 dwelling units, so I'm looking at this, right? 15% of that is going to be 1 to 2, 3 IZ units, right? So you're going to start out those first 2 or 3 IZ units with the lowest fee. And then inclusionary units required beyond that for a mid-sized project. After that, I think it's after the first 3, you kick into the 70,000 per unit.
That's a numerical thing that works.
So look, this is why we have an appeal, and we're looking for clarity from you guys. Congratulations. You know, part of this is semantics in my mind, but it's important semantics, right? We're saying you're paying the inclusionary fee, the payment in lieu, on the last 2 units, right? And that lines up clearly with the language in the CDO. The appellant's saying, well, it's our first 2 units, right? So by calling it the first 2, we should have the lower fee.
Well, maybe we should let the appellant present his view on that.
Okay, let's.
Okay, Liam?
Good evening. Hope everybody is well. So, you know, the city's argument has been basically, I think, look, if we had thought about this, we might have written it differently. And we're worried that somebody else might abuse it in the future. I think the resolution to that is you can amend the ordinance and make it how you want it to read, but you can't read into it what is not there today. It is very clear what the language actually says. And would it be differently if you wanted to say, if they wanted to say it differently, they could have. You know, I obviously have court cases I can point to tell you that the court says you can't read into something that's not there. And that's what's not there. But let me give you some background. I have actually sat and read every document that is online relating to this. This all started in 2015. There was a housing action plan, and that identified that there's really a problem with the then existing inclusionary zoning, that the payment was so high that nobody ever used it. And then the city engaged a private consultant who did a study on interim zoning and recommended that the fee get lowered because of a couple of reasons. One was that they wanted it to be used more, and much of the argument was they wanted actually some money to be used for purchase housing. They wanted to fund the trust fund with some buyout monies so that it can be used for different purposes than just rental housing. So there was a report written, and there was a presentation made by a joint committee of zoning and then these consultants, and they went around town. And I don't know, it would be helpful. Can I share screen, or is that not possible?
No, you can share a screen.
Okay.
I think Scott has to.
So Liam, I'll have to promote you to panelist if you want to screen share. So just wait a second.
Yep.
Is he
So
talking?
Liam, you're muted if you're talking to us.
You're still there?
I apologize. I don't know when I was shared, I guess I changed the settings. So there was a joint committee after the consultant made their recommendations. There was a joint ordinance committee, community development committee, and they had some presentations and they presented a PowerPoint. And this is the first time that this incremental language shows up. Before that, there's a lot of discussion in the hearings about providing flexibility, but you can see that it says the language only incremental units pay higher rate. 17-unit project, which this is in that tier, 35 for 2 units and 70 for the third IZ unit, and so on. So it obviously contemplated that there could be, 2, 3, 4, 5 units. The next was another meeting of that, and there was a chart issued, and then the language is slightly different here. It says that it's 35 for the first, 70 for the third, rather than 210 for 70 for all 3 units. So again, it's clearly saying that if you buy out, that you're going to pay this lower price. Then there, it was first drafted and appears in a first draft of zoning amendment on April 9th, 2019. And It is the language that ultimately became adopted by the planning commission and then the city council. And it talks about a marginal fee approach. And again, it has the language about 35 for the first two and 70 for the third. Now, I'll agree with Scott that I've read all the minutes and I've read the reports, and I see no discussion of why it was suggested in this way, but that's what was suggested, and that is what was approved. So then I can stop sharing. The question is that's what approved. The language is pretty straightforward. It 1, 2, 3. That's what it says. For this project, what I think something that is important to take into account is the project was approved and underway well before this interpretation of that was administrative interpretation. The administrative interpretation wasn't made until after the developer indicated that they were planning to do a partial buyout. And if you look at the interpretation that was made by, well, I guess it's signed by Bill Ward, it just boldly states that, the payment in lieu may be used to satisfy projects inclusionary zoning in whole or in part. If used in part, the marginal fee approach shall still be used and based upon the number of dwellings within the project articulated in 9.1. And then, for example, 2 inclusionary uses on sites uses the payment option for the third, and the payment in lieu would be 70,000 per unit. That's just made up language. I mean, there's no basis for, say, an interpretation. It doesn't say, well, I get this interpretation by reading the ordinance and I see this, or here's a statement of intent or anything. So what we have here is a situation where a developer goes in, does their budget, gets approval, proceeds on the basis that a clear reading of the ordinance is what it says. This is a project that's in that 17-unit mid-tier. First is, should be 35,000. Second should be 35,000. 70 should be the third. Now, the city may want something different, and I would suggest that you might want to change it if Scott's concern is some big project coming in. But you can't retroactively apply a interpretation to a project that's already approved and under construction and then seeks to pay the payment. Now, I would note we have put the full amount of money in escrow and paid half the amount of payment so that we're in compliance in order to get our certificate of occupancy. But we think that a fair reading of the ordinance is what it says, and there's no basis in any document to support the administrative interpretation.
So just to clarify, Liam, your view is that the units that aren't built, that are going to be off-site or whatever, are always the first couple of units and not the last couple of units.
As currently drafted, that is how the interpretation is. It says it's the payment in lieu for the first, second, and third. It's not the payment in lieu for the last out. And it could have been drafted in a different way, but it just wasn't.
Liam,
Any other questions for Liam from the board?
yeah, I've got a couple. Can you hear me, Brad? This is
Yeah.
Jeff. Liam, I may be just missing it in the ordinance, but does the ordinance, I see that the interpretation says the payment in lieu can be used in whole or in part. Does the ordinance say that a payment in lieu can be used in whole or in part?
It doesn't say it one way or another, and as Scott said, since it didn't prohibit it, it was asked about early and told that, well, sure, you can pay in part.
I'm struggling a little bit because it seems like here, the examples we're dealing with are created by the challenge of applying the examples in the ordinance are created by the fact that it's silent on using payment in lieu in part. It's implying that it's payment in lieu for all of the required. So it would be 3 required units for their example. That's all the units they're required to provide. And so I think your client is relying in part on the administrative interpretation, which allows you to make the payment in part, but then is rejecting the part of that same interpretation that says, here's how we also interpret it when you do that in part. Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, if an ordinance, as you know, has to be read by its plain and ordinary means first, and there is nothing in the ordinance that says that it has to be a buyout of all. Second, I believe, I apologize, I'm just trying to get to the right spot in the ordinance again.
I think it would be logical, and I can understand why the interpretation of the ordinance allows a partial payment in lieu. What I'm worried about is the interpretation is there to address an uncertainty, and we're sort of cherry picking the parts of the interpretation that we like or don't like. We could just read the ordinance to say it's silent on this. You either pay for all of them or you build all of them.
Well, I don't think that would be consistent with the language. It says that the developer of a constructed project may provide a payment in lieu of trust fund rather than construct inclusionary units on or off-site as determined. And then it goes down through it and it talks about a payment per unit. So obviously, there is a concept that there can be a unit, and then otherwise the example makes no sense, because this says that a 17 unit project will be 35 for each of the first 2 units and 70 for the third. I mean, I read that to permit that you could buy out 1, or you could buy out 2, or you could buy out 3. And the language that was in the slideshow, which talks about so on, clearly implies that you could have a partial buyout.
I think 3 is the number that would be required for a 17 unit project based on the 15%. So I think that's where the 3 comes from. But it is not stated specifically, but that's how I interpret that.
Fair enough.
I have a question. I don't know if it's for Scott or for Liam, but in the original zoning application that we approved, was any detail included there on the number of inclusionary units? Like, is this a change that has happened since that approval?
The number was noted as 15% or 7. I don't remember offhand, do you, Liam, if it said whether you guys were pursuing payment in lieu or on-site? I don't know.
No, I don't believe we were at that point. I think it just said 15% in accordance with this Article 9.
Well, I think we sort of understand at least understand what we don't understand. And Unless there's something that either Liam or Scott wants to add at this point. Well, appreciate it. We will probably.
Sorry,
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, Leo.
Before we go, I have another question. Either Liam or Scott, the phrase marginal fee approach taken alone, what does that mean to you?
What do you mean taken alone?
Not as part of this ordinance, but just in general, a marginal fee approach.
Is there a
It means
definition?
graduated. Yeah, it's a graduated fee that increases or decreases in proportion to what it's related to. In this case, it's related to the number of units, either increasing or decreasing.
Yeah, there's actually a very interesting Vermont Supreme Court in a related matter on this by my old partner, Peter Langlock, was with a land use tax where they have that there's a tax of, and I'll call it 15% on a profit up to 0 to 99. And then when it hits 100 to 200, it doubles, it's 30%. And the question was whether the tax for the first 0 to 99 would be taxed at 15%, and then the amount over that would be taxed at the 30%, so that you didn't have this notch. And in fact, actually, the Supreme Court said, because of the way it was drafted, that there was a notch, and that if you had a project with 101%, then you're going to get taxed at 30%. And if it was at 99, you'd get taxed at 15%. So that's the concept of marginal fee, is that it's incremental as the more numbers that you buy out. And I think that, you know, that's our reading, is that the more numbers you buy out, higher the fee.
Good question, Leo. Okay, like I said, we will probably deliberate at the end of tonight. Hopefully we won't be here too late. But thank you, Liam.
Thank you. Good to see you all.
Okay, close this public hearing. Next item is 501 Pine Street. Is the applicant here for that?
Yes, the applicant's here. I just got to fish him out.
Okay. And then is that Kurt?
Yeah, Kurt.
Yep.
Here he is.
Is there anybody in the public to speak on 501 Pine Street?
Yeah, we have some folks looking to speak, Brad.
Okay. Do you want to admit them now? I mean, how many people are there?
I see two folks with their hands up. If anyone else wants to speak on this item, raise your hand and we can swear you in. All right, so we have 4, Brad, so I'll let them all talk. Does that work for swearing in?
Yeah, I don't see them up here yet, though, so I don't know who they are.
Yeah, so we have Catherine Bach, Ruby Perry, Gordon Clark, Diane Gayer, and Scott Mapes. So we're up to
Okay.
5.
So I'm asking, there we go. Okay, so we've got the applicant Kurt, and we got Catherine, Ruby, Gordon, Scott, Diane, and Andy. Do you
Wait,
all swear?
I thought Diane was speaking about the pods.
Well,
We'll find out. Fine.
yeah, we'll find out. So do you all swear to tell the truth and whole truth under pain and penalty of perjury?
Yes.
I do.
Kurt, that includes you too.
Yes.
And
Okay.
Brad, I
So-
need to recuse myself from this matter. Sorry.
Okay.
This is Jeff.
Good. Thank you, Jeff. Kurt, I think this was reviewed by DAB, and there were some changes that you had made subsequent to that, I believe, in the part of the application. And so I'm not sure what would you like to say in terms of presentation. Can we pull up the plan or the rendering of this, Scott?
Yep.
And if you want to start speaking about it, Kurt, you can.
Sure. We had a design advisory board meeting, two of them actually, and we addressed the concerns. And I'm not quite sure what else to say.
Okay, so you had curbs so that it would, and
We had curbs, we added overhangs, pictures and overhangs, awnings for the containers, restrooms were added.
the rendering shows solar panels, but you're not doing solar panels, right?
No,
But they're in the rendering.
that was a part of the concept planned, but we chose not to go in that direction.
Okay, well, you can always add them.
Yeah.
Then I just have one question really for Scott or Ryan. This is Ryan's one. Ryan. The graphics on that, I'm just curious, the graphics on that part of the construction here on the left side of the rendering, is that signage or what is that?
The tower looking thing, that's, I guess you'd call that art. He did have a sign incorporated into that originally, but that didn't meet the sign ordinance, so I had him remove that, and he has. So that's art, I would call it.
And if he's going to do signage, he'll have to apply for that separately, I take it.
Correct.
Yeah, that's his intent. That's part of the condition, and we talked about that today. So he's going to address that potentially in a future zoning application just for signage.
Okay. So we do have people from the public to speak, but I'll ask if the board has any questions for the applicant first.
Yes, I was wondering about the car situation and just what the intended use is there.
Well, for drop off of customers and pickup, some food delivery services can come up and grab their items and deliver them. And if the handicap parking is required, although it's not, presented in the rendering, it could be used for handicap parking.
Am I assuming right that this is one way and that you'll have some kind of signage denoting this as one way?
Yes.
I could anticipate with food pickup or drop off that there might be a line onto Pine Street. Have you considered traffic and managing that?
No, I mean, we just assumed this would be sufficient.
Can I follow that up?
Go right ahead.
So when we looked at this the first time, I think it was last year,
Correct.
it had the same general configuration, but the difference is these are now permanent structures. Scott or Mary, I forget whose project this is. Could you help me out with that?
Yeah, it was just, they just proposed pads and they would have food trucks be able to come and go.
Did it have the same circular driveway entrance and exit?
It did, yeah.
Okay. And we don't have more trucks or less trucks, right? This time it's just, instead of trucks, it's now containers, basically.
Yeah, I think it was, Mary serves, correct me, but I think it was 4 truck parking pads with the same idea layout.
That's what I proposed, yes.
Is this something where DPW reviews the traffic, Ryan?
For zoning standards, it's not large enough of a development to trigger our requirement for traffic studies.
So the threshold for needing a traffic study, and this is quoting Vermont Trans, is 75 PM trip ends. So either AM or PM, and this is nowhere near it. So we don't have a full-blown traffic study.
Do we have a trip generation estimate, Scott, somewhere?
I'll defer to applicant Ryan.
No, nothing's been provided for me regarding traffic and trip generation. Nor was it brought up, previously a DAB or anything like that. So,
Well, and it wasn't an issue when we first looked at it.
Right. No, that, my recollection, it didn't come up.
Yeah, it didn't. How many square feet are the of shipping containers do we have?
It comes to, I think it was 1,400 square feet total.
Would drop-offs for supplies for the for the restaurants and pickup then be at hours other than 11 to 11? That would be the idea.
Yes, that's correct.
Do we need parking, Scott?
There's no on-site parking requirement in this district.
I have a question. Has the applicant gotten recommendations or approvals? And any recommendations accompanying that as far as the brownfield site? The permits and so on? Have we obtained that?
I'm working with the Vermont Department of Environmental Protection and the EPA. And we're about to submit a plan for redevelopment. And so I've been working with them for 2 years on this project.
So they could theoretically have more recommendations for the project then?
Yes, they could.
Yeah. Okay.
And our zoning permits aren't issued until that's finalized, Scott, is that right? Or sorry, Ryan.
That's that's okay. That's correct. That's a condition of the permit.
And sorry, just to clarify with the cars, there'd be signage or there'd be something to say drop off only. I don't know.
Well, there's going to be a one-way traffic sign, and we can put handicap parking if that's required. And but clearly in the rendering, we don't have any of that.
Yeah. But I guess that's the question, is the intention that people are gonna park their car there and eat there? Kurt?
No.
So if they're gonna eat there, they're gonna walk there, is that what
They're going to walk, they're going to ride their bike. Hopefully we'll be able to get some accommodation through
so
the local businesses like dealer or maybe even the city, Burlington Electric.
so the signage would have to say something about vehicle access for pickup only, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
honestly, it'd almost be better if it didn't have the curb cut to me.
Any delivery. Well, okay. Any other questions before we get to the public? Any other questions from the board?
Yes, I have general questions about like birds nesting in there. Have you considered
Oh, man.
if that would be a issue?
Well, there's trees surrounding this property as well. It's
Yeah.
4 acres of woods and fields. So no, we haven't looked into bird nesting.
I'm not seeing who the trying to see the rest of the speaker, the public here. Okay, there we go. I see there's about 4 or 5 people. I'm just gonna call on people in the order I see them up here. Catherine Bach, did you want to comment on this?
Yes, I'm glad that you already discussed the parking because that was also something I was concerned about, or rather the traffic. Because I think there probably will be a lot of people who are coming in there and parking and staying, and then there'll be a lineup onto to Pine Street. But my main concern is that there will be a number of trees that have to be cut. And since this is an area with quite a bit of toxins in the soil, that the trees are helping to keep that contamination from getting into the lake because of the coal gasification plant. I would be concerned that even the number of trees for that area that are being cut would make a difference in the number of toxins going into the water system. The other thing I'm also concerned about is the effect of for the neighbors of the noise and it being open so late. So thank you for hearing me.
And Catherine, did you give Scott your address?
Just gonna have-
175A North Prospect,
Thank you.
Burlington.
Thank you.
I'm just going through the list here. Ruby,
Yes, Ruby Perry. I live one block east of this site at 54 Locust Street. And I have several comments and some questions that I'm hoping that you could answer. The first set applies to traffic, and that I think I need to remind you that anyone who's been on Pine Street during the morning and evening commuting hours, this would only apply to the evening, of course, would note that traffic is bumper to bumper. And on weekends, there is no parking anywhere, especially when there's between Little League and the farmer's market. All of our streets in the neighborhood and the Five Sisters are full, and all of the parking lots on Pine Street. So any cars turning off for a quick bite or pickup to take out would necessarily interrupt what little flow that actually is, especially if they're traveling north and wish to make a left-hand turn. It seems critically important to consider the traffic issues already present on Pine Street and the 37% increase anticipated as a result of the Champlain Parkway, which is also waiting in the wings. Has the developer done a traffic study that takes into consideration the traffic flow and doesn't include the impact of the Champlain Parkway? And I know that I heard from Kurt's comments that no, the answer to that is no. And I'm wondering, I think there needs to be a traffic study, because people are going to go crazy on Pine Street when they're trying to get in there, and that's stopping traffic as people pull in. And what if there's other cars in there? Also, have residents of Jackson Apartments, which is right dead across the street, as well as the Five Sisters, been notified of these plans in the review? I live in the Five Sisters and I did not get any notification. And it seems like our input is incredibly important due to the certain impact of traffic flow on their day-to-day lives. In addition, any lighting, any noise from the project will directly impact those apartments. Has the impact on lighting to the neighborhood been considered? And
there are lighting, okay. Yeah, there are lighting standards. I think that's in there.
So that will be considered, the impact on the neighborhood?
The zoning ordinance has lighting standards and they would be followed.
And are they standards for a residential neighborhood? Because in that instance, even though it's a super fun site, it's across the street from Jackson Apartments, which is a working class neighborhood.
Okay.
So I'd like to point out, just in passing, that the zoning changes that are being called for in the South End calls for even more residential development. Is a second food truck patio, there's already one behind Myers Bagels, conducive to the changing demographics of the neighborhood. I don't know whether this board considers that, and if you don't, who does consider that? Because I'd like to talk with them. And then I just have a couple of environmental comments. I understand that the environmental impact of cutting down trees is not something that this body considers in their deliberations, yet the presence of the trees on 501 Pine Street is not incidental. As you are aware, 501 Pine Street is a Superfund site, you call it brownfield, and in fact, the exact location of the coal gasification plant, which left behind, quote unquote, 52 contaminants of concern, according to the EPA. I understand that Kurt says that he's working with the EPA. I hope that also you are working with them. The only reason those toxins are not currently contaminating the groundwater in the lake is because nature, left alone, has contained them safely within the matrix of biology within the soil. This matrix includes the bacteria and mycorrhizal network that work together with the roots of the life growing above the soil. It includes not only the flora, but also the fauna that is now resident in that area. These neighbors are protecting the lake and the groundwater. If the DRB, you people, isn't the body to consider these critical environmental factors, what city department, board of commission will be reviewing the impact of cutting down trees and disturbing the fragile wetland ecology of 501 Pine Street? And with that, I thank you. And my name's Ruby Perry again. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this. And I would love to hear a few answers to those questions to know how to proceed to the next step.
We'll get to that at the end and see how many we can answer.
It also may be part of our deliberation. I mean, we understand and we hear your comments. You know, we have to be careful not to provide any legal advice or legal analysis of what rights or remedies may exist.
Gordon Clark. Did you want to make comments? You're muted at the moment, Gordon. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Again, if you give your address for Scott.
Yes, it's 58 Scarf Avenue, SCARFF in Burlington.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the time to offer input here. I really do appreciate it. I'll speak briefly on 3 different topics. The first one is the traffic. And I gotta say, I'm a little shocked to hear that no one really thought about this or discussed this in previous deliberations. I assume you all are, have been on Pine Street enough to know what that looks like and to know that this rendering you have on the screen is fanciful to the extreme. That it would be a line of cars coming out and a line of cars coming in and people jostling with bikes, and you want to add a handicap space. I've seen other development proposals in, urban or close-in areas where in other respects, like no one thought about the traffic, and the traffic becomes even more hellish than it was before. And everyone's like, oh, what are you going to do? So I would urge you, if for no other reason, to take this back and take a serious look at what the projected traffic is and what that will do to an already extraordinarily busy street. It just, again, this rendering is just not realistic. With all due respect to everyone who's worked on this, that's just not the way it's going to look. And you know that. The second thing that I would say, and I was not going to comment on, but the question of the lighting came up. And we were told that, well, there are standards for the lighting and they're included in the proposal in the zoning. I happen to live on Scarf Avenue between Shelburne and Wells Street. And for reasons that are unbeknownst to us, this is not related to your deliberations, but it's an example that I want to give you. We had a relatively dark street with 1 traffic light on it, but we survived for the past 5-6 years I've been here. Then Burlington Electric came in and they put up 13 street lamps on our 1 short block, which we were told repeatedly is standard. That's the standard. And it's like impossible for me to believe that anyone who believes that's the standard actually lived in a neighborhood that was suddenly impacted to become like an airfield landing strip, which is what it looks like out there right now. So I don't know what the lighting standards are for this, but if there are any concerns about neighbors and the amount of light pollution, I think that seriously needs to be looked into, because the quote unquote standards are really not livable in a lot of cases. And the third comment I would make is on environmental issues. And I appreciate that this is a development review board. It's not a land preservation review board. I would still like to think that at some point you acknowledge that open space has a value and importance. And, more than a postage stamp, a small, another food court. I think I heard someone say brownfields before. If I'm not greatly mistaken, lot 501 is part of the Superfund site. 453 is the brownfield. 501 is part of a Superfund site. And if the EPA wants to say that just paving everything over and putting up a food stand is okay, I might question their motivation. And I really, you know, it's not exactly a secret that the EPA is a few years behind the science in terms of what remediation looks like for polluted areas. And the idea of all things, building a food court on a Superfund site just makes no sense to me at all. So I thank you again for the time. I respect your process and what you're going through. And I hope you take these comments seriously, because I honestly think the more that I see it, the more I have serious concerns about this project and its inappropriateness for the location. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Scott?
Yes, good evening.
And again, I think I can give Scott Guston your address.
Yes, Scott's got my address. Yes, this is Scott Mapes. I represent Rick Davis, the owner of 501 Pine. And I've been working with Rick for the last 15 years or so on various development proposals on 501 and 453. We don't necessarily have any opposition to this project, but I do have a few technical questions that relate to how this development may impact any future projects on 501 or 453. Primarily, it has to do with the direction of runoff from this project and how the site is going to be either excavated or filled. We've done a fair amount of analysis across this entire property that has informed us as to what would be acceptable levels of height of fill or depth of excavation. And so we would certainly be concerned that this project would, one, create a situation where it's directing runoff onto 501. And in the other case, where to create this building site, are you filling the site up above the limits that we've been working with from our geostructural engineering analysis? Just to give you an example, their site plan, the applicant's site plan references O'Leary and Burke's, that their project's based upon that. If it's the O'Leary and Burke plan I'm aware of 2004, we have updated the contour significantly, and more recently is 2016. And that does create a bit of a discrepancy as to the depth and height of fill that would be required on this site, as it would be consistent with what we understand would be the limitations to meet the EPA's development restrictions. So while I do appreciate that there is a requirement, and I think Ryan mentioned that it would be a requirement that the applicant secure its corrective action plan approval from the EPA and the state, but I would suggest that you change the wording in the staff comments. You've got several prior to release of the zoning permit conditions, then you get it to condition 5, or at least the staff condition. You say prior to the start of construction, the applicant shall obtain all necessary approvals and permits from VT, DEC, and EPA with regard to, it does say brownfield site in the Bard Street Canal Superfund site. I would change that to similar to the above, prior to the release of the zoning permit. It just makes sense that we know that DEC, who's reviewing this corrective action plan, is well aware of other development initiatives on 501 and 453. So I have a lot of confidence that they would be looking at the continuity and integration of how those corrective action plans will work together, especially in light of the limitations that the geotechnical work has informed us about how much fill the site it should take. And I think there was a design advisory comment at one point about how high the retaining wall would be in the back. And so those are the kind of things that would be concerning, that that prior to the issuance of a zoning permit, that those matters aren't resolved. So I didn't mean to get highly technical in those comments, but if we have ourselves covered with the prior to the release of the zoning permit, I think that would be satisfactory. So thank you.
Thanks, Scott. And Diane, did you want to make a comment?
Yes. Hi, Brad. How are you?
Good.
Yes, and I was talking about the containers, not the pods that are later, so my confusion. I'd like to start with, I had a workspace in the Unsworth properties when Arts Riot first opened their weekend venues, which were in a lot of ways similar to this. It was all the trucks, and they would start setting up at 3 o'clock on Friday afternoons, and they would go until late at night with music, with vendors, with food. And it brought a huge volume of cars to what was still Unsworth space, so private space, but there was absolutely no place for parking. Those of us who worked there learned to leave immediately when things started to set up because it was unlivable. You couldn't work, you couldn't hold a meeting, you couldn't be on the phone. And if you had walked or biked there, you could barely get through the throng of people. So I'm coming from that as an example of what I see this conveying. Yes, it's dynamic. Yes, a lot of people may want to come into the city for this particular venue, but it's very much not contributing to the health of the neighborhood, if I can put it that way. So that's why it raises a lot of questions for me, because I did live through that for about 5 years. And I think people have talked to the parking and the traffic, but what is curious for me is, and maybe you have a site plan that's to scale, but this drawing clearly isn't to scale because the cars are the size of the containers. And the, you know, there aren't any contours on this. And as Scott Mapes talked about the contours of the site, there's, I can see you looking for the site plan. Yeah. It's always difficult. Well, are the cars really that big compared to the containers? It seems like the drawings and the trees don't look like that. So I'm concerned that there's a lot of push-pull in the drawing as it's presented. And so we're not getting the entire picture. And that does go back to, how are the cars really going to circulate through there? And you only get 3 cars for the pickup, and expecting everybody else to come by traffic, by foot. So I don't feel like hard questions have been asked about this, knowing that you have a very current example from the Unsworth properties in recent years and the current conditions from the Saturday farmers market conditions. And then others have also talked about, you know, what happens to Jackson Apartments and what happens in terms of lighting at night. And the lighting at night was very minimal in the Unsworth thing, and that did work. It does not have to have high security lighting. And I think the lighting plan for Burlington does speak to non-high intense lighting. So I would hope that people would seriously take the work that Kathy Ryan did 20 years ago in terms of lighting for a project like this. In addition, the stormwater issue, which is huge on Pine Street, and it's going to continue to be huge, as other developments happen and as the Champlain Parkway moves forward. Currently, I'm not sure that you've required a stormwater plan for this site, which concerns me because the stormwater from the south end of the city, and you can look at the stormwater mapping that the city has, and I have copies of those, flows across this site. So if you can imagine South Park, all of that water flows directly across right in here. And if all they're doing is a pad and not doing any retaining, and I don't see any stormwater retention in this particular plan, that does shunt the water onto other people's properties. And I'm not sure that that's the way the planning goes these days. I think you're supposed to retain your own stormwater mitigation. And I sent some of these notes. And then I'll bring up the liability. So the reference to the EPA, to the Superfund site, the Brownfield site, all of that has a liability impact that if this property creates a problem to the rest of the Superfund site, this property is liable for the impact on the failure of that Superfund site. But I don't know what holds the owners responsible for that liability should it occur. And so I think there's something in how permitting occurs that has to be responsible for accounting for liability when you impact a Superfund site that you're part and parcel of.
Yeah, I will say that that's outside of our jurisdiction. That liability is set by CERCLA and the Vermont equivalent of CERCLA.
But it must then still be referenced in the permitting process by the city.
Not necessarily.
You wouldn't reference any other permits, even by federal entities?
There's some level of overlap, but we have to follow our standards. But that's different than liability.
I think we don't want to get too much into this. I would, Diane, there are a number of other reviews, such as by EPA, by DPW, and things like that, that address a lot of things you've mentioned. The particular liability thing is not something that we would get into, and others will.
Okay, I don't mean for you to look at it. I mean for you to acknowledge it in the permitting process. Okay. And okay, I'll stop shortly, but the impact on the natural resources that this does in terms of what happens to both the stormwater and the Superfund site sensibility of the natural resources in our city, I think are of concern. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thanks, Diane.
Diane, what is your mailing address?
21 Redstone Terrace, Burlington.
Thank you.
Andy, Simon, are you there? and ready to
I
speak?
am. I wondered if I could share a screen just to start with very briefly.
I believe that you can. Scott has to do something for that.
Promote me.
Yeah.
Andy,
Hi, Scott.
how's it going? I'll promote you. You should be changed over in a moment.
I have to unmute. Thanks very much. I wanted to share just a glimpse of, we're looking a lot at the the micro view of this project. And I know that this isn't the planning commission, but I do want to have a look at the sort of larger view of where this fits in. And Scott addressed this a little bit in terms of 453 and 501 Pine Street. I've been working as part of a group called the Friends of the Barge Canal. We've been doing a lot of work, especially on the city portion of the Barge Canal, which is this middle section that where it says RCO conservation. We're talking about 501 here and specifically about 501 Gatehouse, this little cutout, a tenth of an acre in 501. There are big changes that are going on in terms of how this land is being viewed. And I think that to isolate out 501 Gatehouse is limiting how you're viewing it. And again, I don't want to get outside of your purview as the DRB, but I do want you to sort of look at a slightly larger picture, which is that 453 and 501 are both being sold, as Scott mentioned, by Rick. The prospective buyer is Jovial King, and she's indicated that she is planning to donate to do her project on 453 that I'm sure you've heard about, but then to donate 501 Pine Street as to the city to be used as conservation land. So to be included into the conservation zone, which would also include this land that's on the west of the actual barge canal to the east of the railroad. So this little postage stamp, as I think Ryan referred to it when I was communicating with him, actually does link up with the rest of the land. And this container food project is going to have some compatibility issues with if this 501 becomes a conservation zone and in fact the city park. So just where it sits, I think it's just an important consideration as well, because even though it's zoned enterprise light manufacturing now, it in all probability will become conservation land. And I don't believe that this project that's being proposed is going to be compatible with the larger picture, the larger vision of what this land is going to become. Okay, I can stop sharing. You don't have to keep staring unless you have any questions about that map.
No.
Okay. The other things I wanted to talk about are some of them have been touched on already, and I don't want to belabor these points too much, but I think they're all important. The traffic flow question, I just want to add to this question of traffic flow on Pine Street is, as a biker in Burlington and a walker, this shared use path that is going to go right by with the Champlain Parkway is going to go right by this this project, if it comes to pass, is going to send lots and lots of bikes and walkers who are going to be intersecting those cars turning into the food truck patio, the container patio. And I see a major problem in terms of safety for passersby in that interaction between the cars and the pedestrians and the bikers, especially with the onset of the Champlain Parkway and the fact that this is going to be a major thoroughfare for biking and walking. Right now, it's it's a sort of a underdeveloped sidewalk, but it will become actually an important area for biking and walking, and the cars cutting into it are a problem and will be a problem. I also want to underscore the thing that Catherine brought up earlier, Catherine Bach brought up, when this original application was put in, I noticed that the applicant, that Kurt put that the previous use for this land was a parking lot. Now, I don't want to get into whether that was an untruth or not, but this land was never a parking lot. And the fact that there are 40-year-old trees, something like 30, 40-year-old trees on this property indicates that it hasn't been a parking lot and really never was. And the role of those trees, I think Catherine spoke to already in terms of stabilizing soil, sequestering carbon, and other uses are important and should be considered. And I'm wondering, a question that I have for you is, why isn't the Conservation Board taking a look at this project? Why isn't that necessary for even a project of 1/10 of an acre in a zone that obviously has conservation value and impact, as Scott brought up, in terms of stormwater and I would say also the movement of the mobility of the toxins in the soil. I mean, I would note again that there are 56 contaminants of concern in this soil, according to the EPA, and the phase 2 environmental assessment that was done for this site noted high amounts of heavy metal called vanadium that was above in all the soil borings that were done, all above Vermont non-residential standards for that particular heavy metal. There were also significant amounts of polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, total petroleum hydrocarbons. These are not benign substances. You know, whether this is safe for a food service business or not is not something that I can really speak to. But I do know that there has been concern ever since the Southern Connector was ruled inadvisable or impermissible for this area. There's been a big concern about the mobility of the toxins in the soil moving toward the lake. And you know, the gradient, the hydrological gradient, as Scott Mapes pointed out to me, you know, is down to the lake from here. It's quite a bit, the gradient goes toward the lake.
Andy, I don't want to, I mean, I think that's all very valuable information. It's just not an area that we have the expertise to review, and we have a requirement, and that'll be part of our conditions, that the right bodies look at that. And I don't know what exactly how that permit process works, but that may be something you want to stay aware of.
Okay, I hear you, and I won't speak to that, but I do want to just point out one more thing, is that, you know, connected to what I was saying in terms of conservation zoning that's going to be coming in, this, when it becomes a city park, will be a park that focuses on, as the mayor has suggested in his memorandum of understanding from last December, focuses on industrial heritage, indigenous heritage. There's quite a bit of history that is connected to this site, not specifically to just to the gatehouse, but in fact, the gatehouse is exactly where the manufactured gas plant was, and so does relate to the history of this area. And I don't think that it's appropriate to put this kind of business, especially when there's so many questions that have been brought up about it, ones that the board brought up, but also other, you know, members of the public have brought up, that it's appropriate in an area that's going to focus on all these different aspects of our heritage, that a food truck patio just doesn't fit. And I want you to consider that in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Okay, so I think one question I have from what Andy commented for Ryan is, why isn't this part of the Conservation Board purview? Is it because of the size of it, or?
I think it's distance from the waterfront.
So the Conservation Board hasn't looked at this because it's not within any one of the identified natural areas or within a buffer. It's been scaled out. The property is too close to the road. The larger parcel behind it has, I think it's 3 natural resource overlays and buffers, but this parcel doesn't.
Okay, Well, I don't know if I have any more questions for Kurt at this time. Does the board have any other questions for Kurt?
No, I think we should, I have some deliberation questions for us,
Yeah.
but
Just sorry, one more quick question. I didn't see a utility plan. That wasn't included, correct?
A lighting plan, you mean? Or something?
Utility underground, how things are getting connected.
No. I think there's several plans that probably weren't included that we're going to probably have to go through in deliberative and talk about. Kurt, is there anything you want to follow up on at this point? We have a lot of things we'll probably talk about in deliberative, but
Well, there's quite a bit of questions asked. I think one of the important things is that the DEC and the EPA are overseeing this and are requiring a corrective action plan that was mentioned many times. That is pending, it's still under review, and so that addresses the environmental issues. The stormwater currently, the lot dips down towards the lake currently. So if it rains and there's stormwater, it's running over this property and into all the other properties. The corrective action is going to address.
Kurt, the issue with the stormwater though is that you're going to be increasing the flow by having more hardscape in there. So that's the reason that it's quite different, and that's the reason it gets addressed through the permit process.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess, the environmental issues are being reviewed and supervised by the DEC and EPA.
Okay.
So stormwater is addressed through the city's stormwater program. Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but has that been addressed already?
It's certainly a condition of approval prior to the release of the permit that get approved. The erosion and the stormwater plan gets approved before the permit's released.
Okay, but it's in process.
Kurt, it's in process, correct?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay. Any other questions from the board for the applicant? We had a lot of good comments. I thank everybody in the public who spoke. Thank the applicant. As I said, our goal is to probably deliberate tonight. We will see where we get to. And with that, I'm going to close the public hearing on this item. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
So we have two more items tonight. One of them is 23 North Champlain Street, established a bed and breakfast within an existing duplex. And I see Abbott Stark. Is that right? Is anybody else here to speak on 23 North Champlain? Scott, you're muted.
Damn it, you think I'd have that figured out by now. Anyone else wants to speak on this item, raise your hand, please. All right, nobody but Abbott.
Okay, Abbott, I need to swear you in. Do you swear to tell the truth and whole truth under pain and penalty of perjury?
Hi there, this is Abbott Stark, and yes, I do.
Okay. So this is basically recommended for approval. I think I have to say I like the cars in your site plan. When I drew a site plan, my kids, when they were 5 or 6, they asked me why they couldn't see the tires when I drew the cars. And you've got a site plan where you can see the tires. I like that very much. But anyways,
I can't take much credit for that, though Mary did help me get that all laid out, and I thank her for that.
Okay. I think this was pretty straightforward in terms of what you're trying to do and the staff's report. I'm sort of curious, Mary, what's the line between consent approval and not consent approval?
It was how quickly Mr. Stark submitted a final site plan to me. So
okay,
this would have qualified for consent approval had I had his final site plan.
It seemed pretty straightforward on this. I guess I'm curious about one thing. Is it Abbott or Henry? It's Abbott?
It's Henry Abbott, actually.
Henry
But I
Abbott.
do go by Abbott.
Okay. I was just curious, so you're renting out one bedroom in each of these units. And one of them, assumption is you live in one and somebody else lives in the other unit?
Correct. So it's an up-down duplex with an apartment upstairs and apartment downstairs. Upstairs is 2 bedrooms, which is where I live.
Yeah.
And downstairs is 1 bedroom.
I see. So it's when, okay.
So, well, and so the idea is that downstairs 1 bedroom would be always rented to other people through the bed and breakfast.
Yeah.
And then on occasion, while I'm here, you know, if it's just me and I don't have other family visiting, I will rent out the other bedroom in my apartment on a bed and breakfast basis, which is, you know, it's a lot of fun to have people come in and meet new people. And then on occasion when I'm gone, I would rent out both the bedrooms, meaning my bedroom and the other bedroom in my apartment, to a group. So if it was like 2 friends visiting Burlington, or like parents of UVM, I mean, the most common thing is usually parents of one of the colleges coming with their prospective student, or their student is graduating and they're bringing the sibling of their student, or it's like 2 generations, the parents and the grandparents of a student coming and staying together in my apartment and renting both bedrooms if I'm not here traveling for work or personal travel.
I'll just jump in and ask if there's any questions that anybody on the board has for the applicant. It does seem like a fairly straightforward application. Your parking looked reasonable. If there aren't any questions, then Abbott, I will close the public hearing. We will hopefully deliberate not too long.
Okay, good luck. Thank you so much.
Okay. So we have one other item tonight, which is a continuation of a hearing on 51 Elmwood Avenue. And is the applicant here for this?
Yes.
So
yeah.
So I just want to remind people, this is a continuation of a hearing where we had a fair amount of public comment. We are open to having more public comment, but we are not wanting to have people just reiterate what we've already heard in terms of comments and concerns. So
yeah, Brad, I would say that when we continued it, it was really up to the applicant to respond to what had already been said. And I would stress that if people in the public have already provided comments, either written or oral at the last meeting, we've heard them.
Yeah.
We're certainly aware of the concerns, and I would ask that only new people raise those comments or make comments.
Right, I agree with that.
Brad, this is Jeff. I'm recused from this matter.
Okay.
Fred, the other thing we may want to think about is a time limit on the comments.
Yeah, I did that last time. I would do it this time too. 3 minutes per person. Or were you meaning overall time limit?
Well, I don't take a position on overall time limit.
Okay. Yeah. So I was doing that last time, a 3-minute time limit per person. I would continue to do that this time too.
So can we get a sense though first of how many people
yes.
want to talk, and maybe then adjust whether it's 3 minutes or not?
Yeah.
If it's
Scott, can you figure out how many people are here from the public who wish to speak?
If you'd like to speak on this item, raise your hand so we can get a count, please.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay, we have 10 folks raising their hand.
And I'm asking,
plus the applicants. We have 2 for the applicant.
okay, and I'm asking the people who raise their hands that these are people who have not spoken at the previous hearing. So
Barry has spoken before.
Yeah, at least some of the folks have spoken before.
well, I think that if people spoke last time, we actually don't really, I don't think need to hear them a second time. I already had the chance to speak. So I am, without seeing everybody who's speaking at this hearing, I am going to ask everybody who intends to speak, including the applicant, to swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth on the pain and penalty of perjury. And I can ask the applicant to say yes to this.
Yes.
Is that Brian, are you here too?
Yes, and my colleague Malachi Brennan is, if he is not allowed to speak, if Scott, you could turn him on, please.
I see that. So I think because we ended with the public comment, I'd like to finish that up and then get back to the applicant to respond to things, if that's okay with everybody. And so Scott, and again, I'm asking people who have not spoken before, if you can bring some of them up to as participants, Scott.
All right, so if we're keeping this to folks who didn't testify, I'm going to ask that everyone with their hand raised who spoke last time to lower it. So that way I'm just looking at folks who didn't speak last time. Because I don't remember offhand everyone who spoke. Okay.
I have a list. Cooper Siegel has spoken before. Barry Kuehl has spoken before.
Barry, okay.
Okay, so who's going to be first up to speak? Scott, can you?
Oh, so Kelly Devine.
Kelly, if you can.
Thank you, Scott.
Address, and take it away. Kelly?
Do I need to join as a panelist?
No, you're fine just where you are. Can you speak now, Kelly? You just muted yourself.
All right, how's that? Good?
Yes.
So my name is Kelly Devine. I'm the Executive Director of Burlington Business Association. I've been following this project as well as the changes in the Planning Commission closely. I have a couple questions that I've submitted to the Planning Commission that I think apply to this application that I still haven't really gotten an answer to. And basically, as far as this being put forth as a conditional use, and in the staff report, it talks about being consistent with the high residential use neighborhood. I still have a really significant question in my mind about how the community resource center as a use in this location fits in with that staff report. I read the staff report again today, and I don't see how the community resource center, which seems to me a very separate use, falls under those same kinds of the same conditional use agreement. I thought at the end of the last hearing that there was going to be some kind of better understanding after Attorney Byrne brought up the question of how the project was moving forward as a conditional use. I do feel in terms of the community center, which by day, those people, are coming in and out. I'm part of a security team that meets weekly with downtown folks, and we got a lot of reports about what was going on at this community resource center when it was on South Winooski Avenue. And there was the people entering the facility. There was also a lot of activity outside the facility. There was a lot of peripheral activity in nearby garages reported by private property owners. So, I am concerned about that particular use as it relates to the site, how it's going to impact those living in the pod villages. I can't tell from the plan whether it's going to be physically separated. And I do feel like that is a very different type of use, and I don't think that it fits in with the other conditions and approvals on the application. The second thing is I just really feel like I need to urge the DRB to not approve this without a signed contract with a management agency in place. There are so many questions from abutters, residents, downtown businesses that can't be answered by a sample management plan. I mean, it talks in the regulations about how for this type of use, that for emergency shelter use, you need a management organization signed up and ready to manage it. And so lot of my constituents, it's been very difficult to answer their questions because there's nobody who's responsible to deliver those services and to be accountable for how the community is operated until you have an actual management organization in place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. And we did have those comments previously too about the management plan being a concern. Thank you.
Sorry, Brad, before we go on, we were, I believe, told in this most recent iteration what our purview is and what exactly we are supposed to be reviewing on. Yes. And I wonder if we should.
Well, one of the things, I just follow up on that, is at the last hearing, Matt Byrne, who represents the, I don't want to get it wrong, the neighboring house, raised the question. Thank you. Raised the question of whether under 24 VSA 4413, this is properly regulated as a city project or conditional use project. We heard Matt's argument about it, and I think the applicant submitted a letter from Malachi about their position on it. And I think it's something we should talk about tonight. I would like to hear about that. And then I think it's up to us to deliberate whether we feel that it's in or out of the scope of 4413.
Okay. Thank you. That is something we will pursue a little bit more. I'm sure we'll hear from the applicant on that. Scott, who else do we have for members of the public that wish to speak?
We have Christopher Aaron. I'll just make a general statement for folks. If you receive notice of this meeting, you don't need to give us your contact info because we have it because you got notice. If you didn't get notice, let us know your contact info for mailing address. With that said, let's go on to Christopher.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Christopher Aaron Felker. I am a resident at 137 Park Street here in Ward 3 of Burlington. I'm here this evening to request that the DRB reject this proposal. I understand that it is reviewable for under location, off-street parking, traffic, noise, and lighting, and there are many concerns in the neighborhood, whether it be the occupants at Mackenzie House that are directly next door, or people in the surrounding neighborhood, that the city hasn't put forward a complete plan that we can accurately evaluate their likelihood for success. As a matter of fact, much of their plan is woefully lacking and incomplete. Anticipated occupants of the shelter are, according to the city's application, aren't expected to have cars. That includes the 30 to 35 people that will be residents there. And this is pure fantasy. People who are experiencing homelessness, many do have cars. Many will have these cars and they will be impacting the neighborhood, the surrounding neighborhood, because they need to be able to park them. The design plans for this proposal only has limited amount of parking, which is already allocated for employees and staff that we haven't even hired yet, because as Ms. Devine had already mentioned before, there's no management company on file or on contract to actually operate this, which is another concern.
We had many comments about the, just in the interest of time, it'd be nice not to go over that again and again.
Just trying to get through my notes, sir. I appreciate it. The impact of 100 people coming to this homeless resource center should be evaluated on, the impacts of this should be evaluated upon the neighborhood before we proceed. There are better locations for this project. I do feel that this is a valuable project that could actually have tremendous impacts upon helping our homeless population, but this location is inappropriate. The rules presented by CEDO and Director Pine state that if somebody violates the rules of this homeless pod village, that they are then banned from an 8-block radius, but We have received nothing from CEDO on how they plan to increase security and patrols in the immediate surrounding neighborhood, let alone how they plan on enforcing this 8-block radius of anybody who gets banned. Furthermore, other occupants, we have met resistance for when we've reached out to CEDO requesting that they be able to vet the residents of this shelter pod community. Specifically, there are members of the neighborhood, including Mackenzie House, that do not want registered sex offenders living right next door to them. This is less than 2 blocks away from schools and daycares. This is an inappropriate location, and I request that the DRB reject or kick back this proposal to the city and let them complete it again. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Christopher. Okay, Scott, who else do we have for public comment?
We have Mark.
Can you state your full name and address? Mark, are you there?
Mark doesn't have a very good connection.
We're not able to hear you, Mark.
Absolutely. You can hear me.
You don't have a connection. We can hear you, Mark.
Do we want to come back to Mark?
Yes.
Okay.
We'll try to come back to you, Mark. If you get a better connection, it'd be great.
All right, Rebecca. Looks like Rebecca Hodling. Sorry if I got that wrong.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So my name is Rebecca Hoteling, and I'm the property manager for O'Brien Brothers. One of the properties I manage is Mackenzie House. So as such, I feel it's necessary to express my opposition to the proposed location of 30 shelter pods and a community resource center for several reasons. First, based on the drafted guideline, guests of the pods will be permitted to have visitors between the hours of 9 a.m. and 7 p.m. These visitors will not be permitted inside individual pods or other buildings. So assuming that each guest is allowed only one visitor at a time, which is not specified in the guideline agreement, it's plausible that there could be 60 people socializing outside at a given time. Since the consumption of alcohol will be permitted inside the pods, loud and unruly behavior will occur on site. In addition, the Community Resource Center will provide other services to the public, not just for guests staying in a pod. And it's estimated that at minimum 100 people will go to this site daily. So, you know, the sheer volume of the noise created from this site will be overwhelming and unbearable for our residents. In addition, based on the site plan, the location of the raised garden beds is adjacent to bedroom windows at the Victorian building. So, you know, this too will be a source of noise that will directly impact the peaceful enjoyment of our property. We do have some residents that work night shift hours and sleep during the day. And, you know, the noise created from only being able to socialize outside and the constant foot traffic to the resource center is going to directly impact the residents at Mackenzie House. You know, it's going to impact their ability to work as well as other major life activities. You know, the drafted guideline agreement doesn't address the issue of trespassing onto neighboring properties. You know, it's clear that illegal substances will not be permitted at this proposed site, which means that guests are going to go to the nearest property to feed their addiction. And, you know, as you know, Mackenzie House is one of those properties. There's already an issue with trespassers that cut through our private property. So it's important to understand that the proposed project and the sheer volume of people coming to and from this site will exacerbate this issue. In addition, it seems clear that sex offenders are going to be allowed to stay in the pods. It should be noted that HUD requires us to automatically deny subsidized housing to sex offenders. So, you know, naturally, there's a strong concern about the safety of our residents. and those households with children. You know, and it's not clear if this project is approved, how will the unknown managing agent ensure that our residents are safe and that sex offenders will not trespass onto our private property? You know, lastly, and more importantly, I know it's been said, we still have yet to hear who will be managing the site 24/7, which at this stage, it doesn't allow for any sort of a vetting process. And this is essential information. And since it continues to be unknown, this project should not be approved. And lastly, I just want to say, you know, we overall support the big picture goal of ending homelessness, but the proposed location is not a good fit, as it's going to severely impact the residential neighborhood and the vulnerable population of Mackenzie House residents. So that's all I have to say, and I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Scott? David Call. I just do want to make a comment that we did have several hours of testimony a few weeks ago, and a lot of the concerns that are being voiced today are the same ones we heard a few weeks ago. And this, you know, I'm not saying that because I'm not discounting them. I'm just saying we take them to heart. So anyways, with that said, David?
Hi, I'm David Call, 60 Elmwood Avenue. Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is uncharted faith contract in our community. What's uncharted is we have a central location that's going to help our community with all the resources and address all the unhoused. We have broken so many promises to the unhoused. If we had one location, I am a senior citizen with my sister. For example, I'm not afraid of this project because I think if they had we have everything lined up, counselors, workers, job programs, this project is going to be incredible, and other cities and towns will copy this project. We just have to have a good faith that things will work out, and it will be fine if we understand this one thing. Everything else is mentioned in our society, but one thing's not mentioned is the unhoused. And because of this, we can centralize everything. And if I can live with them, these beautiful people that need a chance, then I'm not afraid. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Scott?
David, can we get your contact info?
David Call, 60 Elmwood Avenue, Burlington, Vermont.
Yeah, thank you.
And do we have anybody else who's?
Hey, we have three more. Ashley is next.
All right, Ashley.
Hello. Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, so we have actually 3 Mackenzie House residents that would like to speak. They're residents that have not spoken yet. They did not speak at the last meeting.
Okay, but I will say that saying the same concern over and over again does not really.
They just want to be heard.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
So
Yes.
going to go first.
Hi, my name is Trudy Richmond and I live here at Mackenzie House. And I just want to go on record as saying I do oppose you putting in these pods right next door to us. My main concerns in placing a 35-bed low barrier shelter next to a low-income senior housing community is the increased lack of safety and security in the neighborhood and the welfare and quality of life of the senior citizens who live right next door to the proposed low barrier shelter. The type of shelter CEDO is proposing is called low barrier. And a low barrier shelter, quote, guests are typically allowed to stay while under the influence of alcohol and drugs, and even to continue to engage in street activity or substance abuse. There is no requirement that they work towards sobriety nor recovery, end quote. Additionally, quote, low barrier shelter means an emergency shelter that does not require criminal background checks, sobriety, nor an ID. And this is exactly the type of shelter and the type of behaviors CEDO wants to put in a residential community 1 block from Church Street. The Burlington Police Force is currently stretched to its limits, and they are not in a position to deal with this type of concentrated antisocial behavior. If approved, this project is going to put an increased demand on Burlington's police force. While listening to recent Burlington City Planning Commissioner meetings, 2 commissioners spoke about their firsthand experiences of temporary low barrier shelters in their neighborhoods during the recent pandemic. Commissioner Bradley, who lives near the North Beach campground, had this to say, quote, "You may think it was a success, but not to the people living there. It was a complete train wreck. You had people walking up and down the avenue on a regular basis, completely out of their minds," end quote. He also had this to say about the A New Place low barrier shelter, quote, "When A New Barrier opened in Shelburne Road, surrounding neighbors noticed a really, really big change in their quality of life. That's not okay. They didn't sign up for this. It just sort of happened to them," end quote. Commissioner Lee, who lives near a downtown temporary low barrier homeless shelter, had this to say, quote, "Yeah, it was a huge problem. There were sirens, drunk people walking around, fire trucks."
I am going to
End quote. Please, this is 3 minutes. I've timed it. Burlington Comprehensive Development Ordinance, Part 1, Section 1.1.2, entitled Intent and Purpose, spells out the goals of the DRB, 2 of which are to encourage the use and development of lands in Burlington in a manner which will promote the public health, safety, and welfare, and to facilitate the growth of Burlington and its neighborhoods so as to create an optimum environment. I am only asking that you let the stated goals and objectives of the DRB guide you in your decision tonight. Let not only the letter of the law, but the spirit of the law prevail. Thank you for your time. That was 3 minutes. I timed it.
I've been timing from Ashley.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we have 2 more residents that would like to go.
Okay, I will say that, with all due respect, these are repeating things that were said to the last hearing from people.
That was not repeated.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, my name is Maria Vidal. And I think my perspective is a little different. Did you speak to people that have been homeless and have lived in shelters? I have. I spent 2 years homeless. And what you're proposing is not going to help these people. They're going to trash this stuff. You're not giving them a helping hand. Instead, you should be making a building and putting counselors, feeding them, regulating their medications. You're not going to be counseling them. You're not going to be giving them a leg up. You're making it too easy for them. They're going to be able to stay there all day long. When I was in a shelter, we had to be out of there at 9 o'clock. We were not allowed back in until after 3. We had to go out and look for employment. We had to prove that we were getting counseling, that we were getting medical assistance if we had disabilities. We had to prove that we were working to become a viable citizen. And then they helped us to get into real housing. You're not giving them a leg up. You're giving them a handout, and you're putting them in a place where they're going to hurt other people. You're allowing them to drink. You're allowing them to continue their bad choices. And oh, I forgot to mention, I am very much against this. Our crime rate has already increased. In the last 3 weeks, my car has been broken into and somebody let the air out of my tire. I'm not happy. Who's next?
Thank you. Ashley, is somebody else there? Ashley, was one more person to speak? I'm not.
Okay. Hi, my name is Steph Holdridge. I live at 43 Elmwood Avenue. I'm opposed to the project in this location. I think it was put together in a very slapdash way. I think pods were ordered. The mayor mandated that this location was going to be it, and that was it. The planning is anyway. So when we go and say we're opposed to it, we're characterized as being anti-homeless people, which really isn't a productive position to take. I think there's a lot of money going to be spent on this, and I think this should be denied, and the money should be used to put people in motel rooms for a year and not to dig up the parking lot next to our building to put in electricity. And the next year should be spent on making a plan for permanent housing and figuring that out. Did anyone go to the Y to see if the city could lease the Y to set up actual inside housing for people? Anyway, I just think this was a very slapdash plan, and we need to do better. I think you all issue a certificate of appropriateness, and this plan is not appropriate. It's not humane. I'm really embarrassed by us saying that we think this is a good idea. We can do better.
It's not helping me.
That's it. I'm done.
Thank you. Ashley, was that it looks like that was that.
There was 3 from Ashley. So we have Carrie Duquette Hoffman, who's up next.
Okay, Carrie?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you. I'm Carrie Duquette Hoffman. I'm the Agency of Human Services Field Services Director for the Burlington and Middlebury districts. Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this hearing as a representative of the Agency of Human Services. I deeply appreciate the deliberation and consideration that's being put into finding temporary housing options for homeless Vermonters. As you are aware, housing is a key challenge facing Vermonters. This is especially the case for the greater Burlington area. The agency appreciates the innovative and creative efforts of the city and supports this project. Thank you for considering this critical initiative to provide basic shelter to the residents of our current neighborhood, to the residents of our neighborhoods and our current neighbors who have struggled to access the greater housing market. It's a truly vital project, and I really appreciate your deliberation. Thank you.
Carrie, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So do you have any view on some of the comments made about how this is, the residents here, because of drinking and other things, that this is maybe a challenging environment to have in a neighborhood?
That is a great question. I think the city has worked really hard to find the site that a site that would be the most supportive, and housing the community resource center on site will really work to address people's needs. I think there are community members across our neighborhoods that use substances, and I think we work to provide each of our neighbors the resources that they need. I can't speak to whether I think that this would be an increased access, although I do think that housing definitely, it creates circumstances where people have the chances to access the services and supports they need to make the next step in their lives.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Is there somebody else to speak to, Scott? You're muted, Scott.
We have Alex Twombly up.
Alex.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, so actually there was a little confusion because last week my boyfriend Alex Twombly used my account to speak. So my name is Cooper Siegel. Sorry for the confusion here tonight. And I live at 50 Elmwood Ave. And I will try to be brief tonight because I know that obviously you have heard a lot of comments already. I mainly want to speak here to the reality that, you are reviewing the project in large part based on noise, light, trash, all of these concerns. I think that the reality when you're placing this kind of project in what is a majority low income neighborhood, those factors become amplified because the homes around here, which are majority rental homes, do not have the same protection from those factors. There is little noise canceling, there is little protection from light, where there are much less safety measures in place. Most homes around here do not have security cameras. So I just urge you to really consider those factors very much as you're going through this process of reviewing the case, because I do think that we're looking at a slightly different conditions surrounding the pod community. So I do urge you really to think about that very strongly. And the other thing I just wanted to comment on was just, obviously there are many neighbors here tonight to comment on this project. And I just want to point out the reason why there's so many people here tonight who want to speak about this to you is because we did not have the opportunity to learn about this project in time to speak at the city council meeting. Most people in our neighborhood were not aware this was happening. I was lucky. I happened to find out about the city council meeting a couple days beforehand. This is not the case for a majority of residents in our neighborhood. So I just want to say that is why you're seeing so many people who are wanting to speak tonight. And that is, people want to feel like they're part of the process. And I think that's really important that people have been here tonight to be able to express that. Anyways, that's all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Cooper. Are we through everybody at this point, Scott?
We have Ryan, Allen, and then we have Mark that we can try again.
Ryan? Go ahead. You're muted right now, Ryan. Yes.
Hi, all. My name is Ryan Allen. I do activism in Burlington. I also work for CVOEO. Though it's my activism that really centers my life. I do a lot of outreach to the homelessness, or those people who are experiencing homelessness, to those experiencing unsafe housing. And I get it. I understand that it's hard when you perceive these other humans as just drug users and bums. I think it's really hard to get past that. My first real experience with Food Not Cops is when I helped clear a woman who has 3 degrees, 3, I believe, bachelor degrees, maybe a master's, from her home. A little one-room apartment, or one room in an apartment building last fall. And she went on the streets. I don't know if she was on drug use. I don't know if she, I don't know what her life story was, but she had a dog, 30 degrees, white lady, white blonde hair, and she's on the streets. And that wasn't my hardest time doing activism in Burlington. No, the hardest time for me was watching a man who I didn't realize was homeless, who, as nerdy as it sounds, we were gonna start playing Dungeons and Dragons together. And then one night when we were hanging out together, I realized that he was homeless, that he didn't have a home in Burlington. And I know what Burlington's like for the homeless, those experiencing homelessness. Food Not Cops helps with camping gear, with food every day at the parking garage from 1 to 2. We'll feed anyone. And I'll even feed Nazis, because everyone deserves to eat. And I think that you can't change your mind without safe shelter, without safe water, without healthcare, without support, without food. And really, it's really just a anti-humane stance that so many people have taken. It's like, get these people out of my yard, get these people out of my city. I don't like them, they're gross. I just want them out.
Ryan, Ryan,
Oh, yeah, I hear you, and yeah, it's fine, because like, you're not experiencing homelessness, and it's fine, because Mira Weinberger just decided to clear Sears Lane. And yeah, it's fine, because we can just
Ryan, I have
make
been trying to
homelessness
keep it
someone
within
else's
2 minutes.
problem, because that's really what it is. It's
Okay,
really,
Ryan.
it's not giving a shit about humans, is it?
Thank you, Ryan.
Scott, you want to mute Ryan? Thank you. Appreciate the work you do. It's not necessarily germane to our deliberations tonight. Please try not to curse on our Zoom.
Thanks.
All right, last one. We can try Mark again. All right, Mark, you're up.
Hi, Mark. We'll see if your connection's any better.
Hi, hopefully it is this time.
Oh, we can hear you. Yes.
My name's Mark Bouchette. I'm Vice Chair of the Marketplace Commission and a property owner on the Church Street. I'll be as brief as I can. I just want to share our concern that we understand the need for a facility like this and support a facility like this, but we do believe it's the wrong location. We think it's contrary to the Burlington City Plan, congregating folks in who are vulnerable in areas where they have access to substances is potentially problematic. And we want the first project like this to be a success. And we're concerned that if it's located at the Elmwood location, that it will not be. That's all I have to add. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mark. Well, I do thank everybody from the public who has spoken on this. It has been helpful and maybe taken a while to get through. So at this point, I think we'll go back to the applicant. And I think there are some specific questions that have been raised through the public process. And I guess I'm just going to note a couple, and I may ask the board to have other issues that they may want to have the applicant address. The ones that I get concerned about is, one is, as people say, without a management team, it's very hard to understand how this is getting managed without having somebody who's actually going to be managing it. The second one is, I do have some concerns about how the site is laid out relative to the Mackenzie House. Is the site plan really thought out with respect to that? It seems to me it's laid out in a generic fashion without any view towards what's really on each side of the property. So I just want to ask the board, after going through all this, and get back to the applicant, if there's any questions they have specifically for the applicant. No. Okay.
Great. This is Malachi Brennan on behalf of CEDO.
Yep.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, for your questions and focusing us. I guess briefly before I turn it over for more detailed response, I just wanted to give an overview of what we submitted in paper to the board. In addition to filing from our office, we have a memo from CEDO that addressed questions from the staff comments, including wastewater capacity, setbacks, and bicycle racks. And we also believe we addressed all the outstanding questions from the board at the previous hearing related to emergency access, snow removal, with attached letters from the fire department and DPW. We also submitted a legal memorandum, which I'm more than happy to discuss with the board tonight. I think it mostly speaks for itself and makes clear, the Environmental Corps has made clear that Section 4413 does constrain the DRB's role here. And we really would like to focus our response on the information that's germane to the commission's review. Specifically, before I turn it over to Sam Dunn, with respect to the management plan, respectfully, I don't think the details of the management plan fall within the enumerated criteria of Section 4413. The applicant has already committed to have on-site staffing. It will be required to keep the conditions on the site with compliant with the city's noise ordinance, and will have staff there 24/7 to do so. Given the authority that the DRB has to review this project, it's not clear from CETO's perspective how the management plan details or who is managing the site is germane to that question when you have specific.
Malachi, I think you may be correct, and maybe we'll come to that conclusion as we go through deliberative. But in the process, we ask these questions because we think they are germane. And we understand, when we look at noise, setbacks, location, density, off-street, loading facilities, traffic noise, lighting, landscaping, screening requirements, we see some of those sort of maybe fitting into some of these categories. Now, maybe we're stretching it, maybe not. But that's why we ask the question. So with all due respect, we sort of like some answers from those.
Certainly, I mean, I could see how most of the board's questions would fall into those categories, but the managing agency does not appear to be.
Well, the whole ability to control noise seems to rest on having proper management. And if management doesn't exist, it's hard to understand how the site is really going to be in compliance with noise ordinance.
So respectfully, Mr. Chairman, management will have to exist in order for the site to operate. And CETO and the city as owners of the site have committed to meet certain standards within their application, including having it fully staffed. So if the site is operational and compliant with the conditions that the board is going to impose, if it approves.
I don't need to get into that. That's enough said. If that's your position, that's fine.
Okay. And then with respect to orientation, screening, and the overall design of the site, I've of course turn that over to subject matter experts. And if you have specific comments you'd like to direct to CETO.
Okay. I don't at this point. Any other questions from the board for CETO at this point? A lot of this is something we would discuss at deliberative and see if there's anything.
I have still just a couple of questions on the design. And down the center aisle where there's, which is the access road, there's right now on the parking lot, there's a center aisle, it's a raised curb. Is that going to stay or is that going to be removed?
That's going to be removed.
Okay. All right, that was it. Thanks.
Thanks, Ron.
Mr. Chairman, this is Brian Dunkiel. You
Brian.
did receive a letter from or a memo from the mayor today outlining their urgency of receiving a decision from the DRB. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Having a decision as soon as possible is really critical.
Yeah, we do. And that letter is posted on the website now, isn't it, Scott?
Yes, it's posted on the.
Yeah, we did get it directly, and then it got posted. Thank you. So I'm going to say that if everybody's silent on this, that we have probably taken enough testimony and have enough information that we will be able to deliberate tonight. Unless it's something else that the applicant wants to add at this point, either Samantha, Malachi, or Brian.
I think I would just like to echo the point that Brian made for the need for a decision tonight, and just want to read from an email that I received this evening at 5, letting us know that we've got 230 households in Chittenden County that are no longer going to be eligible for the motel program starting on July 1st, We have 41 people camping in the city of Burlington who don't have access to shelter. And the existing low barrier shelter Champlain Inn is currently turning away an average of 6 individuals per night that are looking for shelter. So this is really a critical need. Thank you.
Thank you, Samantha. Okay, well, this has been challenging, I suppose. I will close the public hearing then. I thank everybody for participating in it. And we will actually be deliberating shortly. So we have other business, don't we, Scott? There's a
the other business item, Brad, can be taken up as part of your deliberations today.
Okay, then we will keep it there.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, I am closing the, ending the DRB review board meeting.
Pine Street, which is ZAP 22-1. I move that we grant the appeal and find that the 2 remaining units that are being that are using the payment in lieu of option would pay a fee of $35,000 per dwelling unit under the zoning ordinance.
Second that.
If I understand that correctly, Jeff, that would be then the 3rd unit would have been at 70,000.
Yes,
Right.
if they had a 3rd unit, it would be at 70,000 under the ordinance.
Okay. I see Kim is over here now. And guys, you know Kim?
It is, but I know there's some questions probably in upcoming applications.
Okay.
This one, it seems like you're already on a course. I think there is different ways to look at this. The question of which ones the units are actually, you have the first 3 actually already being on site, and then you have the split, which is what making the complication. So there's
and the problem Kim, is the ordinance doesn't talk about how to deal with when you do it partially on site and partially in lieu. And I really think that should be clarified, because I can see why the zoning office issued the interpretation, because it's not in the ordinance. You could conservatively read the ordinance to not allow that. Either you build them all on site or you follow the graduated, marginal approach in the ordinance. I don't think that's not how I read the intent of the ordinance.
So I'm going to say we have a motion and we have a second on it. And unless there's any further discussion, I'm going to say all in favor of the motion. All opposed, none, and there's 1 abstention. So,
and I would just echo Caitlin's request, because it should be the other way. We should correct the ordinance so that this doesn't occur in the future, to deal with staff's concerns about the implication of this.
thank you for the attempt at clarification.
Recording stopped.
Do you need to record?
Recording in progress.
On ZP-21-800 501 Pine Street, I move that we approve the application and adopt staff findings.
Second that.
For discussion, can I point out a procedural item? So this application has been in the queue for at least 6 months, maybe a little longer. So your motion, if you're going to continue it, should also acknowledge a 3-month time extension for the application.
But this motion was not continuing.
Continue.
The other thing, the suggestion that I forget which agency it is, the one that reviews the environmental on the state level and federal level, that would be required before issuing the zoning permit rather than prior to the start of construction.
I'm not in favor of doing that. I think it's a requirement either way. They're not going to be able to do anything with it. So like,
They're not gonna be able to move forward till they get them anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments on this? Okay, all in favor? Well, I'm going to vote for this too.
Yeah, I changed.
Yeah.
I'm vote for it.
So, and opposed? 4-2.
Recording stopped.
All right, let me make sure I have the right thing up in front of me. I am making a motion on ZP-22-19951 Elmwood Avenue. I move that we approve the application and adopt staff findings with the addition of limitations for residents and guests against any sound amplification outdoors.
Second on the motion.
I'll second that, but with another friendly amendment.
Yes.
I think there should be 2 overnight staff at all times. That's under section 4. There shall be on-site management by qualified adults. It says 1 management person for every 25 beds. I think this needs 2 management people.
I'm fine with that.
So
if we're making friendly amendments, you know, we could talk about light, you know, strong lights also.
Well, hold on 1 second. Caitlin, are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay.
they're required to meet the lighting ordinance of the city, so.
Yeah, right.
And I think they're using some of the existing lights that are there. I think that was part of the plan, is that they're using existing lights on the property. I'm confused about one thing on your motion. There's 30 pods and 5 of them have, am I remembering right, 30? And then there's 5 of them that have 2 occupants, is that?
Yes.
Okay, so it's under 50 occupants. Is that, that's I remember. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't.
But that sounds like it would require 2.
Anyways, yeah, but I think AJ's
making it explicit.
Yeah,
it's good.
Someone brought up the issue of parking and cars, and I don't know. I thought that was an interesting point.
I don't think we can. I mean, do you? What are you proposing?
I'm not sure. Our purview, at least in this, lets us consider off-street parking, which I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know how I would address that. But I think that it is a good point to consider. Theoretically, if a new 30-unit apartment building were going right there with no parking inside, no off-street parking, then you know, there'd be certain requirements. I don't know how I'd fix it. I don't have a suggestion, but I just thought that it was interesting.
well, I have to say I've never been a fan of this 43, whatever it is. When we go through UVM, I'm less of a fan of it here, but we have a motion, second. Any other discussion on the motion? All in favor? All opposed? 3. So we don't have approval. So
Recording stopped.
That was 3-3, Brad?
Yep.
Yes.
On ZP 22-199-51 Elmwood Ave, I move that we approve the application, adopt staff's findings and recommendations, subject to the following additional conditions. There shall be no playing of amplified music on site. There shall be 2 overnight staff people. And the applicant must submit a management plan to staff for this application prior to the release of the zoning permit.
Second on that? Brooks. Amplified sound outside. AJ, is that what you meant?
Yes.
Is that okay, Brooks? Amplified. And management plan. I'm just trying.
Management plan of what? Like, can we specify what?
Well, management plan for all the, well, they're saying they're gonna.
Addressing the operational management of the system. Who's responsible for compliance with the terms and conditions? And a contact
Minimum,
person. I think the management plan needs to have a contact person. If there's an issue, who are you calling? Are you just calling randomly the city? Are you calling the police, or is there an actual management number to call? I think that's important. The residents should have some way to contact the operator.
Well, to use their language to ensure, a safe and plan to ensure the project's functional use.
Right.
Leo, were you going to say something?
I'm good. I'm good.
So Kim, this is my take on this is what we need to do so we can approve this thing. And maybe we're pushing the bounds of it, but it doesn't sound like it's going to get approved without this. So that's what it takes.
Is that a question or just telling me?
I'm just saying that.
I understand that situation. I
It's
appreciate that.
challenging. It's challenging. All in favor of the motion? No, opposed. What happened that you, you don't like the.
Doesn't think we need the plan.
We weren't,
Recording stopped.
we went.